Hey guys, Poro here with the Day 2 recap of First Stand 2026. We have two BO5s today, the first between Gen G and JDG, and the second between Lion and Loud. I predicted a 3-0 stomp for Gen G due to their seemingly untouchable gameplay compared to JDG's various flaws, and a 3-1 for Lion over Loud because of some question marks surrounding the potential performance of a few of Loud's players on an international stage, despite CBLOL's great showing at the America's Cup. Before getting into draft for Game 1, I read over your comments from the recap yesterday and I'm going to make a few changes for this. First, draft graphic is gone and will instead be replaced by a feed of the literal draft that happened in the actual series. Everyone is used to seeing it this way already, so hopefully that clears up any confusion. Next, I swapped back to stars instead of bars, but you all need to promise me that everyone understands that 3.5 stars is equal to a 7 out of 10. I do ratings out of 10, the 5 stars won't change that. With all of that out of the way, let's get right into the first game of Gen G versus JDG. Game 1 draft, I prefer what Gen G came out with. They first picked Rumble, which is pretty standard, but with Vi and Jarvan out, only Pantheon is left as one of the premier meta jungle combos for Rumble. JDG go for Seraphine instead of Pantheon though, because Vampire is a great Seraphine player and they want to secure Ashe, and this allows Gen G to snap up Pantheon. They then go Bard on 3, and this is a great pick. Bard is already perceived as a solid answer into Ashe Seraphine because he can help his AD carry survive the poke and pushing power with his heals, but it serves as a double counter here because it does not feel good to play Ashe into Rumble Pantheon Bard. This forces JDG to pivot to a more underwhelming Ezreal, and now Gen G are way ahead in draft. JDG go for a flex pick Aurora to hide their final matchups because Aurora is really good at hard countering Rumble, and Gen G round out their comp with Twisted Fate for more lockdown CC to chain everything together. JDG decide to send Aurora mid into Twisted Fate and go Ornn top for the good lane matchup and better scaling because putting Aurora top to shit on Rumble and having another squishy champion mid seems way too fragile into all of Gen G's tools, but at this point it's a little bit too late to salvage the draft, and Gen G's mid game looks super powerful. JDG do have tools though, and if they can get to late game then they can start fighting back with Seraphine Deathball and Ornaments. I would rather be Gen G for sure, but it's not a monster draft stomp. Getting into game, JDG actually look amazing for the early game. Junja skips Krugs to find a surprise gank bot lane that Ruler and Duro are not ready for, and then Hongq gets a solo kill onto Chovy through a raw outplay. I want to point out that Hongq has been a solo kill demon in LPL, and he solo killed Knight like 4 times, alongside most other mid laners at least once or twice. Seeing him solo kill Chovy too is really cool and cements Hongq's laning skill as world class. Junja also goes top and finds another kill onto Rumble, and now all 3 lanes have advantages for JDG. Gen G stay headstrong though and play early game as stable as possible, picking up the first Drake and equalizing the gold lead by farming up passively. Chovy even uses his passive to be up almost 1000 gold. This second Drake is super important for JDG to get. If they let Gen G get 2 Drakes, the mid game power from all of their setup tools will be too much and they'll easily be able to get Soul. If JDG can grab this Drake though, it will give them 5 more minutes to scale up for those ornaments and key item completions like Seraphine's Diadem. They also have the gold lead, so it's a good timer to fight. Gen G are masters of playing their comps out though, even from behind, and it's just a perfect setup from them. The equalizer is literally perfect. It separates the entire backline from Xin Zhao and gives him only a small area to try to walk out right next to a wall, where TF stun into Bard stun means he dies before the ult even comes out. Canyon then ults into a choke as JDG try to run, and Gen G clean up the teamfight easily. The game is basically over, and JDG made very minimal mistakes in the process. Junja overpostures a bit on Herald, but it's hard to blame him. JDG need to find some way to get into the space, and only he or Ornn can do it. Somebody was going to look bad if they were going to try and get any kind of even fight, and it happened to be Xin Zhao. Duro lands a perfect ult to space everyone away from Xin Zhao again, and the game is even more over than it was before. Nothing else to say for this game as Gen G easily win from here in a stomp, but I want to point out a few moments that really highlight how phenomenal this team is. At 19 minutes, Keen showcases his ability to land perfect Rumble ultimates once again. Canyon is actually probably playing too aggressive here, but instead of the Rumble ult being thrown down earlier in the play or in a line over the enemy champions, he throws it in the choke with the longer end of it being towards Pantheon, meaning Canyon can actually survive and get out. The last play I want to show is this flash gold card from Chovy about a minute later. To me, this seems like a ridiculous flash at first, with Chovy stunning a full health Seraphine with a shield and ultimate while his team is a little ways off. However, the damage must have been calculated pixel perfectly on this, because Gen G use all of their possible tools at the Seraphine, and she barely dies, probably with only double-digit health points of wiggle room. Normally, I would write this off as luck, but Chovy flashed so confidently that I have to assume the team somehow knew intuitively that they could barely take the kill. Point is, Gen G are the best team in the world for a reason, and it's genuinely mind-boggling how good they are when they're in form. Game 2 draft is much closer in my opinion. JDG end up with some stuff I like. I generally think Lulu with X Champion is the better end of the trade if the enemy has Yunara without Lulu, so getting Lulu when you know the enemy team wants it is a good choice. I don't like the Jinx though. I think Jinx in theory could be fine because you have Jinx Lulu, which is strong, and Yunara isn't necessarily going to destroy her in lane, but I would have much preferred Aphelios. His level 1 Calibrum does well to ward off Yunara's level 1 spike, his lane is much more stable than Yunara's, Aphelios scales roughly equally as well as Jinx, and I'm just not seeing the downside. The rest of the comp is also pretty up in the air. Genji have Vi Ahri, which is a strong mid-game combo, but Hongqiu is ready with the Veigar counter pick, which is good into Ahri because the Cage has long enough range to render her kit somewhat useless. Renekton vs Gnar top is also a matchup where both sides have timers they can play, so it's not like Genji have a hard win here. I was thinking maybe Kennen could potentially be good for Keen instead, since it stomps Renekton and Vi can afford to hover top on some timers since Jinx Lulu won't be threatening anything bot side. Overall, I think both sides are happy with what they have, and both maybe had angles to try other picks and find more or less success. In my heart though, I feel Genji won draft because this is a very Genji style comp, and JDG's comp is complicated to navigate a bit. The game itself was another showcase of why Genji are such a terrifying team. Most of the early game was fairly standard, and the big swing came at second Drake. Junjo went in to play for the steal, and he got it, and JDG figured maybe they could fight with Jinx reset. They didn't properly connect Veigar into the fight though, and Genji all snapped onto Hongqiu instantly to get the initial kill and win the fight. From here, JDG were on the back foot for the rest of the game. Despite this, they still found some good angles to play. Here for example, Xiaozhu finds a really nice flank angle that Genji are never expecting due to the state of bot wave, and Junja is able to capitalize off the flank with a huge 3-man ult. JDG end up picking up 2 kills and some summoners off of this. Generally though, even though JDG are playing well, this comp is almost impossible to win with from this game state against Genji. Since Veigar and Jinx are so far behind, the team comp isn't functional as is, and the entire responsibility of making every single comeback play falls solely onto Jarvan. Junja has an impossible task here, needing to have a near perfect read of the game state constantly to determine if his engages will find value. Junja, why go back in? See, people will like say that, and then it is bad, but it's also like, you are JDG, you are getting bled out, you're losing the entire game. It's always tough, right? Because don't make the obvious mistake, right? But if you play to not make mistakes in this game state, you will just lose. So like, what do people want? Do you guys want JDG to just make no mistakes and lose? Is like that the ideal play, or he just entered for fun? Yes, but his mid laner is a Veigar and his support is a Lulu. He's the only person on his team, other than like maybe Renekton with a flank angle, but like you're not gonna get a Renekton flank when Genji have this much controlled vision. So realistically, Junja's the only person on his team who can go in. Like Jarvan is the only person on the team who can initiate anything, and so it's solely on him to like evaluate the entire game state to figure out like if it's a good engage, if like everybody else is in position. It's like he has no help on that front, so it's hard. Like, it's a really hard game. Like for example, if you're Jarvan here, do you go in? Do you EQ the Rakan and just try? Like your Renekton's in position, even numbers. If you're not going in now, when are you going in, right? Like sure, he EQs in, he misses, he gets knocked up, like maybe he gets one shot. I don't know what Ruler's doing on the side. Ruler doesn't even die. But like, imagine if they had used their tools to kill Jarvan there, instead of killing Renekton, right? Like, imagine if Yunara wasn't out of position and Jarvan dies. Like, you could say, oh, what? Junja just EQ'd in and he hit nobody and he died, and now Genji are ending, he's inting. But it's like, what was he supposed to do, you know? So basically, like, here's generally the deal. Is that at this point in the game, at the point where he makes the mistake, like, my rating for Junja was a 6 out of 10, right? Because, like, I think Junja's done some good stuff this game. Like, he's made good plays, he's tried his best. Some of the fights where they fell really far behind weren't necessarily his fault. Like, there was the one where, like, he went in and stole... He compromised his position to go in and steal the Drake, and he did steal the Drake. And then Genji just collapsed on the Veigar who wasn't connected with the team, and then they lost the fight, so that's not necessarily his fault. Like, he did his job by going in and stealing the Drake. They're not expected to win the fight, because he used all of his combat tools to steal the Drake. Then there was, like, other plays where he, like, went in with the Renekton, and he found, like, the 3-man Cataclysm, and Renekton had the flank, and they were able to get, like, some kills, and Genji were not expecting it. Like, that was a good play. So, like, I gave Junja a 6, right? And then so, at this game state, Genji are just playing really, really well, and they're up 6k gold, and the third Drake is spawning, and their comp generally feels really good in the scaling department because, like, Jinx is just way too far behind, she's never going to be valid. Ahri's always going to win side against Veigar, Gnar's always going to win side against Renekton. Like, there's no way for JDG to progress this game. Like, as far as I'm concerned, this game is over, right? And then again, like, there's also the stuff that we're saying earlier where it's like, okay, Jarvan he's the only engager on his team. Nobody else can go in. He has to be the one who's evaluating if every single play is going to be good for all 5 players on his team or not. Like, it's a very stressful position to be in, right? At this point in the game, pretty much no matter what Junja does, no matter how stupid of a play he makes, I really don't want to dock him down. Like, I really don't want to lower his rating from a 6, because it's like, what is he going to do? Like, there's nothing to do, right? So, like, we can look at this play, right? It's a bad play. Like, okay, tries to go in on Ruler. Not great. Buffers the ult. But then he's like, okay. He's going to go back in, right? It's 3v2. Honkyu's also, like, maybe in the area. Rakong's not here. They know where Ari is. They know where Nar is. They're like, maybe it's a 3v2 and it can turn into a 4v3. And he goes in and he doesn't quite get the engage off. Canyon backstepped. He prepped for this maybe happening, so he backsteps. And then he gets one shot, right? So it looks stupid, right? Like, sure, he misses an EQ here. Engage isn't good. He flashes out. He EQs back in. Misses again. Dies. It looks bad. But again, what is he supposed to do? Like, he can hit the EQ. Like, you know, he could do that. And maybe he could, like, turn the game around. Like, I'll just put it this way. Like, if he hits the EQ on Yunara here, like, let's say this is a knockup, right? Yunara's still not dying, but, like, let's say that this is a knockup. Maybe you, like, throw Jinx ult, you throw Jarvan ult, Yunara's got to press barrier and flash, then you have numbers, maybe you can, like, chase with the second EQ and stuff. Maybe you can kill her, but it's hard, right? And, you know, he has to use the ult and the flash to buffer that, and then he's gonna, like, let's say he lands this one, right? Maybe you get the knockup, and maybe because they have numbers, let's say that this just extends into a really long play, and then because it's a 4v3, JDG somehow win the situation and they're, like, back in the game, and they can, like, get the second Drake, and maybe they're only down, like, 3k, right? That's, like, that's great, and I would be, like, really happy with Junja for finding the angle, but then you could also argue, like, okay, why is Ruler so far up when it's 2v3? Why is Canyon trying to save Ruler when it's, all, like, still 2v3 and going to be a 3v4? Like, you know? Like, is this just Genji inting? It's like, it's hard to evaluate this kind of stuff sometimes. Like, I don't think it's that simple. I really wanted to include this portion because I feel like a lot of the community can tunnel in on plays that look silly in mid and late game without considering what the actual game conditions are when the play happens. I'm on record as a Junja defender for this play, despite what the initial gut reaction from all the viewers was. Anyways, it seems like Genji will 3-0 this series fairly easily, even with JDG in good form. Game 3 draft is very Genji favored in my opinion. I don't mind the early Annie Prio from JDG, but you have to build a comp around her for her to succeed, with the ability to scrap an early and mid with 80 fighters and high damage. Instead, JDG ended up with Maokai Annie mid jungle in a game where both champions are hard to pilot. Annie has a tough lane matchup into Hui, and Maokai ult is fairly low value into the high range of Hui Jin plus the spell shields, cleanses, and unstoppables of Mbessa, Alistar, Nocturne. This makes JDG's game pretty hard to play, both in terms of skirmishing power and in 5v5s, and I think Genji are happy to play another control comp about building space. In game, I was actually very impressed with what both teams were doing early. Junja did a great job monitoring all 3 lanes and found a shocking amount of solid proactive advantages. Hongkyu also held back Chovy for as long as possible by using his mana bar super aggressively to minimize the amount of timers where Hui had prio, and Maokai was always there to hover on those timers to make sure Genji couldn't punish. Hui's pushing power is inevitable though, and Genji played great around Chovy's lane. Duro and Canyon were there on every timer where Hui could get a significant advantage from pushouts, and he quickly developed a substantial gold lead. Despite JDG trying their best, the game was slowly heading in Genji's favor, and it looked like they would be bled out. At the Drake though, JDG pulled off a miracle. They played fully for the fight instead of the objective, and through a combination of very tightly knit play and a perfect teleport flank from Zehen, they picked up multiple kills and brought the game back to even a bit. Genji regained control from a mid play initiated from Duro though, and their comp has such high range that they were able to extend the play more to get multiple kills. This turned into a Baron, and it felt like the game was over. I actually don't think Genji set up their Baron properly at all though. They should have 3 people top and Mbessa mid. Nocturne can take control of topside jungle, and then they can push. Instead, they have 4 people mid and Hui solo top. Then Chovy pushed one wave too fast, and Junja saw the angle to collapse on him and kill him, ending the Baron push. The final fight of the game was on the ensuing Drake. JDG tried their best to work their way in, but it's too difficult into Hui Jin Alistar when they were able to establish position, and JDG get aced in their attempt to play the fight afterwards. Overall, this was a pretty high level game in my opinion. Both teams played well with the comps they had, but a couple of mistakes from JDG and a generally difficult to pilot comp was all it took for Gen G to close out the series. It's a 3-0 from Gen G as expected, but I have to say, it felt like JDG fought well. I would consider this a fairly strong showing from both teams, and Gen G are simply much better than everyone else in the world. Canyon was brilliant today, which was refreshing to see since he struggled on these exact champions in Split 3 last year. It feels like he's truly back in form. Everyone else on Gen G were pretty strong too, and I'm even more convinced now than I was before that they'll easily win the tournament. For JDG, not bad at all. I think they'll be fine in the tournament and are definitely not underperforming. Xiaozhu got to show off some of his stuff, especially in games 2 and 3, Hongq's laning is still good, and even Gala seems more alive than he did for a lot of LPL. The biggest thing for JDG though, heading into their next series, is that Junja is playing with the team a lot better than he has been, and it turns out the international Junja buff is real. I expect JDG to be able to handle the winner of Lion vs Loud, and speaking of which, let's get into Game 1 of that series. Game 1 draft is actually slightly Loud favored in my opinion. For Lion, they have tools. Pantheon Ahri can roam around and make plays well, Gnar will have side lane pressure, and I generally don't believe Ezreal Nico will have enough laning pressure to make Yunar or Lulu irrelevant. However, with the Mel counterpick in the game, Loud should technically have 3 winning lanes. Renekton wins first 8 levels, Ezreal Nico should have pushed as soon as they stabilized level 1, and Jarvan can influence lanes more than Pantheon pre-6. If Loud want to win a game, this is not a bad draft to do it on. The lane starts and already it's a disaster for Loud. Envy went for a Raptor's ward and was immediately punished for it, needing to blow flash level 1. With this pressure, Inspire targeted his lane and set him behind, and now Ahri can potentially be relevant in the game. Bull and Redbird also lose too many trades in bot side, and they don't have prio either. Youngjae navigated the early game quite well in my opinion with a good invade, good cover on the counter invade, and a nice dive top. Despite that though, Loud weren't able to find leads anywhere, and the game is really difficult to play if that's the case. Envy finds a solo kill onto Saint, but this isn't nearly enough of an advantage as from here on out, Inspired completely runs the game, being everywhere he needs to be to snowball the game to epic proportions. Dokla also has a few nice mid-game moments. He solo killed Chino with some great kiting, and he survived a gank attempt with a well-placed ult. Loud tried to push up for some turret pressure, but Gnar baits them in far enough for Inspired to be there with the Pantheon ult, and the play goes entirely in Lion's favor. From this point, the gold lead is insurmountable, and Lion are able to easily progress the game into a win. I have to say, if Loud can't win an early game with this comp, I'm skeptical of their ability to win any games against Lion, since I already believe Lion should be favored in almost any mid-game. Game 2 draft is a complete massacre in Lion's favor. First pick Ryze for Loud, and Lion go Ashe Cassio for the mid matchup, and then Loud go Kalista Renata into the Ashe for some reason, which is hard losing into Ashe Seraphine. Even though they know Isles wants to go Seraphine, they countered themselves. Ryze also loses to Cassio in lane, so Loud are countered in every role. Lion can just blind safe jungle on 4 and counter on 5, and they do exactly that to close out this draft with 3 hard-winning lanes and better scaling. I don't see how Loud can win here. Getting into the game, Lion immediately take a big lead. Redbird positioned too far up in lane a couple times and got his flash blown, Envy died to a mid gank from Mundo, and Dokla played aggressively to put Sion on the back foot. Youngjae also overstayed for a top crab and was killed, and it felt like Lion were going to win the game outright. Loud had a few big punches back though. Right on Kallista's level 6 timer, Youngjae went for a bot gank and caught Berserker and Isles asleep at the wheel, and the Aatrox picked up a nice double kill. Then he and Redbird roamed mid and got a shutdown to Ryze, bringing Envy back into the game. Inspired and Saint overextended for a Scuttlecrab topside a bit later on, and Loud were now fully in the lead after a solid punish from Shino and Youngjae. Lion's comp is still super annoying to deal with though, and is great at punishing mistakes, and Loud overstep hard at 24 minutes. They think they have a window to play for mid tier 1 and maybe get a dive off, but Ashe survives the initial engage, and now it's slow city with the cleavers and arrows coming in, and in a super long and drawn out chase down, Lion pick up shutdowns on Sion and Aatrox, and they get a Baron. Lion is now the team in the lead, and it feels like the death ball will be too much. The entire time though, Ryze was farming up to a point where he can be relevant in teamfights, and with Actualizer completed and Hextech Soul spawning, Envy played the teamfight excellently. He has a super deadly flank position, and Isles doesn't respect the damage output and flash range. Loud are able to clean up the fight, Ryze picks up 4 kills, and the Hextech Soul is claimed by Loud. Against Hextech Soul, the game is really hard to play, and Lion made one too many mistakes in mid-game. Loud completely run over the final 2 teamfights of the game, with Renata and Aatrox playing the first teamfight super well, and then Ryze one-shotting both carries on the enemy team for the second one, and they're able to close out the game. Color me impressed. I did not expect Loud to win with this comp. Everyone on Lion made multiple mistakes, but Loud's players, especially Envy, really just played this one well with their positioning and mechanics. It's a good punch back from them, and maybe we'll get a close series after all. Game 3 draft is another draft in Lion's favor in my opinion. Loud's comp does have ways to play with more clear win conditions, as they have a more structured teamfight and a Sivir win condition, but I think Loud's comp will run into a major side lane issue in mid-game. Garen will slowly win against Cassante, and Aurora will have to respect LeBlanc, and this means Lion will have complete pressure on both sides of the map, which they can use to have full control of vision and objectives. In the game, nothing happened for a really long time. Youngjae tried some antics bot side in exchange for Inspired getting more camps, and Saint slowly generated a mid lane gold lead, but there was nothing significant occurring. Then, at 12 minutes, all the dominoes started falling one after another. Qiyana went for an invade with no mid prio, and she was swiftly killed. Then, Envy completely outplayed Saint 1v1 and got a solo kill. Both mid laners then swapped to side lanes to face off against the enemy top laner, and both of them were solo killed on opposite sides of the map. Cassante ended up getting the most gold out of the situation though, which helped out Loud's side lane problem quite a lot. Now the two solo laners actually have more ability to fight back for the waves, especially the Cassante, but Inspired was the one to break the stalemate with a great lane gank to get Garen a kill, and he was able to recover a 1.5k gold deficit instantly. Now Lion are back to having that full side lane control, and they're in the driver's seat all the way up until the Ocean Soul standoff. Redbert walks in to try and face check their setup, and he's forced to blow his ult and flash while getting chunked for the majority of his health. At this point, I actually don't like how Lion play this. They stand around trying to hold the zone to find a good punish when Loud walk in, and they do manage to find it when Dokla flash combos Qiyana and gets her down to 10% health, but overall I thought playing it this way was too risky. Since Lion got Alistar's tools, Loud have no reliable way to actually engage a fight. If Lion just turn to the Drake and start hitting it, it will force Loud to either give up the soul for free, or have them walk into contest where they'll be easily aced. Either way, Lion are drastically ahead now, and they end the game cleanly by turning off a Baron start and wiping the entire enemy team. Game 4 draft is winning for Loud, but I feel like people will quickly misdiagnose what the issue is. The casters and analysts didn't seem like fans of the Jace and Jhin, but those were not the problem. The problem is that those picks were kind of forced because Lion chose to go B1 Rumble. Vi, Jarvan, Pantheon, and Qiyana are all out at this point, and there's no reliable jungler to go with Rumble to get value except for Maokai. To get reasonable value from Maokai, it would be nice to have an AD mid, but going Yone is not possible because Loud blinded Akali. When the dust settled, I think Lion ended up with a serviceable Rumble comp with the tools they had, but they definitely get outscaled and will have side lane problems, so they need to win every mid-game objective fight. As soon as they lose one, the entire game is over for them. So it's possible for Lion to win, but it's hard. I generally hate picking Rumble in late Fearless when all of his best jungle pairings are out, and I think they should have gone in a different direction in the back room. A lot of things happened in this game, but I think I can sum up my main points with just two teamfights. The first is the third Drake fight. Inspired is able to actually get in and steal the Drake, but Saint doesn't connect with the team and is lit up by Nocturne and Akali on the bottom, and then the Rumble equalizer gets very minimal value with no CC and not hitting any carries. If Jace and Rumble can't output damage in tandem with the Maokai CC, their comp is too fragile to win fights at all. On the fourth Drake, Loud are the ones with position, and because of how tanky Ornn is and how fed Akali is on the flank, Lion are forced to enter agonizingly slow, and with Maokai committing to the steal but not getting it, Loud end up on Soul Point, and then they completely run over the teamfight with all of their engage tools. The equalizer once again can't hit any carries, and this was the fight Lion really couldn't afford to lose. From here, the game is basically over and we're moving on to Silver Scrapes. Game 5 draft isn't clear cut, but I prefer Lion's draft very slightly. On paper, Loud have some good tools. They're pretty happy with the bot matchup, and it's a good Zehen angle on paper into two immobile backlines and not a bad jungle matchup. I also think it's a really hard Rakan angle into Vex Nami if Loud are in a decent spot in mid game. The main issue for Loud though are that they have two losing solo lanes. They went for Mbessa's Zehen picks to have a top jungle flex based on the matchup, but both of those picks lose to Jax both in lane and on side lane, so Lion are happy with that. Loud also picked Vex into Victor, a very hard lane matchup on its own. If Loud can make it out of early game without their solo lane suffering too much, I think they can win. However, I'm not expecting that to happen, and I believe Lion's comp would win this game most of the time. Right away, Vex was suffering as Envy died to a 6 camp gank from the Xin Zhao while also blowing flash, which is basically worst case scenario for the matchup. Dokla also got himself a nice lane lead from a good flash play and fancy footwork, and it seems like the solo lane issues that were predicted would come true. Loud weren't ready to give up just yet though, and they found a nice timer to dive Dokla, which got Shino back into the game, and he converted on this by getting a nice solo kill a few minutes later. Mid lane is still a huge issue though, and Saint is able to generate about a 1k gold lead. Heading into the third Drake fight, both Inspired and Saint have solid leads, and Loud can't find a good way into the river. Shino, also with a lead, feels a bit antsy though and wants to use his advantage, and he steps up a bit too far. Isles and Dokla snap on this mistake, and it turns into 2 more kills for Lion. Loud try once more to look for a fight around the next Drake, but Isles has a great recon flank, and Loud get destroyed in the ensuing teamfight. The rest of the game is a slow burn as Lion stack up the objectives with their massive gold lead, and they end the game after Loud go for a desperate TP flank into a lost fight on Baron push. I think Isles played every teamfight great in this one, and Inspired had solid control from start to finish. On Loud's side, there were a few silly mistakes from some players, but other than that, it felt like the comp was just hard to play and the team as a whole misplayed one too many fights. With that, Lion managed to scrape past Loud in a series that ended up being much closer than Game 1 would have suggested. None of these games were at the level of what I saw from Gen G versus JDG earlier, and my expectation is that neither of these teams will be making it out of the group. It's cool though that CB LOL continued to remain competitive with the LCS, and I genuinely think the region has improved a lot in the past year. Tomorrow, we have 2 more BO5s between BLG and G2, and FearX and Secret Whales. For BLG versus G2, I have BLG winning 3-1. BLG are a messy enough team that I refuse to believe they can clean sweep anyone with resilience, but G2 are no masters of cleanliness themselves, and if they can't handle the early games of the Secret Whales, there's very little chance they'll survive BLG's onslaught. That said, the form of some of BLG's players like Knight and Viper were lower than I would have preferred, whereas it felt like the key players on G2 were showing their stuff yesterday. Slight upset alarms are ringing in my head, but only very slightly. For FearX versus Secret Whales, I unfortunately have this one as a 3-0 for FearX. To be honest, this group is really harsh. I was hoping we could get Lion or Loud versus Secret Whales in the group draw because I think the games could have been more entertaining that way, but instead we got the loser of G2 and Secret Whales being basically guaranteed out of the tournament. FearX are a force to be reckoned with, and I would have had any of the non-LCK LPL teams getting 3-0'd by them as well. A short tournament for Secret Whales, but hopefully they can learn and come back stronger for MSI. That's all I have for you for this one. I have a Patreon for people who want to support me more while I'm making these videos. There are 3 tiers, each with varying amounts of benefits, including different types of behind the scenes content, and even a custom Poro drawing that I'll display in video outros. If that interests you, check out the Patreon link in the description. I'll see you all for the next one. Bye!